Welcome back to Real Florida TV. Today our guest is Rick Markham. Rick is currently the Executive Director for Opportunity Florida. Opportunity Florida is a very interesting organization, works toward economic development with a fine eye on some of the more rural areas in our part of Florida. We've got some exciting news. We've got an allocation of funds that will be used to enhance the ability for folks to access wireless high-speed internet, which in itself is going to drive a lot more trains when that comes through. We're going to hear all about that from Rick and a whole lot more when we come back to Real Florida TV. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, or if there's something you'd like to see featured, just give us a call, drop us an email, or visit our website at realfloridatv.com. We'll be right back with more from Real Florida TV.
Grab your boots and saddle up. It's time for the rodeo. Breakaway roping, bull riding, saddle bronc roping, team roping, barrel racing, and much, much more. It's the 9/11 Memorial Rodeo, September 11th at the Trawick Pavilion on Highway 277 in Chipley, Florida. 50% off for firefighters, law enforcement, and EMS as our way of saying thanks for your service. Funded in part by the Washington County Tourist Development Council. Visit 911rodeo.info.
Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Rick Markham, Executive Director from Opportunity Florida. First of all, thanks so much for taking the time to be part of our show.
Thanks for giving me the forum to kind of tell our story. We're real excited about how rural economic development has changed and is going to really take us places we've always wanted to be.
Well, and the pots that you guys have your hands in, probably way too many to talk about on this show. Let's start with the nuts and bolts, Rick. What is Opportunity Florida? Opportunity
Florida was an economic development organization that it really does business as Opportunity Florida. It's the Northwest Florida Business Development Corporation and DBA Opportunity Florida. Whoever came up with the name Opportunity Florida, I wish I could kiss them because I think it's got a great brand and people recognize it. So, and if you put in economic development on the search engine on Google, we're going to show up in that first page, and so I'm real pleased with that. But it began in 1999. A group of local business people got together with, talking about the challenges of the rural communities. St. Joe had just closed the paper mill. The challenges were there. They went to the governor, and they said, if we come together as a region, can y'all help get us more organized and help us build capacity? And that's what Opportunity Florida does. When it comes to a business locating to a certain community and cutting a deal with that community, that's not us. We're to build the capacity, maybe do some regional marketing and introduce. We acknowledge and recognize the fact that the local economic development agency, the Chamber or Jackson County Development Corporation over in Mariana, they're on the front lines. They will make that deal happen. We try to support them, provide them with resources, and also where we can leverage our dollars off with the state, go do some regional marketing. I just got back from Cartegena, Colombia, and looks real good that we may have a deal out of there, and they got to look at everybody. And we get them here and try to sell them on the region, and then we turn them over to the local EDOs, and they try to see if they can facilitate a deal.
So you're not in competition with anybody?
No, absolutely not. We are partners with everybody.
How do you get your funding?
We get a lot from, each county puts in a per capita. It's not much. It's 10 cents per capita. We have a staffing grant with the Governor's Office of Tourism, Trade, and Economic Development. And we work the grant circuit with the best of them. And we just have two people, and we wear multiple hats. My assistant, Susan Estes, she's amazing. She can pretty much do anything that needs to be done, and so we're a good team, and that's how it works. So we really stretch those dollars. Local businesses, primarily utilities and banks and engineering groups, they participate in our dues as well.
So you're not exactly top-heavy as far as your administration.
Oh, no. I would say, if it needs more than two people, we got to find a volunteer somewhere.
Now, you cover a certain number of counties in this area of Florida that we call the real Florida. Which counties are those?
I cover Holmes, Washington, Jackson, Gadsden, Liberty, Calhoun, Gulf, and Franklin. They were designated in 2000 under ex-Governor Bush to be a rural area of critical economic concern. And with that designation, we also there were some thresholds that were reduced, and when we get a project that looks for us, all the agencies of the state of Florida come together under the READY Initiative, Rural Economic Development Initiative, to try to accelerate the process. We also have some tax credits that you won't find in the other counties, and quick permitting, and a lot of benefits just to help us compete.
So you've got a couple of those counties which are coastal regions.
Correct.
And border the Gulf of Mexico. Then you've got some, like Washington and Holmes County, which are very rural and very agriculturally based. So,
absolutely, from Gadsden all the way to Holmes. I mean, I'm sitting there bordering to Georgia. I'm bordering to Alabama. They are agricultural based. However, we have one good asset. We have CSX and I-10 running through the heart of all four of those. So that's a major benefit. And now with the new airport, we've got 79 and 77 feeding down. This airport is as much importance to us as it is to Bay County and the city of Panama City. So it's significant. It's a game changer, and if we could get us a port up and running down in Port St. Joe to assist and maybe do bulk versus Port of Panama City does containers, we can make things happen.
When Katrina hit Mississippi and Louisiana, impacted the port of New Orleans extremely. Panama City, the port of Panama City, inherited a lot of that business. Copper
primarily from Chile. Yeah.
And let's go back to what you talked about, your trip to Cartegena. That has a lot to do with the availability of ports in this part of Northwest Florida.
Well, it's significant to know that in 2013, the expansion of the Panama Canal will be completed. It should be no surprise to anybody, the bank financing that was out of China. And it didn't double. It went up it increased 150%. So it was almost 2.5 times as much. So we feel that we're not going to, and the reason they did, they wanted to put the big ships through. They're not going to come to Port of Panama City, or they're not going to come to Port St. Joe. But they're not going to mothball the little ones. And the little ones are they're not going to want to bring those into Tampa, Miami, or Jacksonville, for the simple reason that it's not efficient when you can bring a big ship in and get it taken care of, and in getting the ships in and out. So where are those ships going to go? And we think we're the place. And in Port St. Joe, we can real quick be up and running for bulk. And I found something else while I was down there. Coal from Colombia has less sulfur and leaves less of a carbon footprint than Arco. They can get it here cheaper from Colombia, delivered here. Well, we've been dealing with coal down in Port St. Joe for quite a while. They also had bans of just bulk steel. All the products that I saw at that port were not from Colombia, and they were not destined for Colombia. They were in a holding position. The Asian ships coming in, dropping off, picking up stuff from the European and the North American ships going back to Asia. That's what I'd like to see us do. So when I went over there, I took a map with me, and I showed, I drew a circle 500 miles around Miami, 500 miles around Tampa, 500 miles around Panama City, and 500 miles around Port St. Joe. Port St. Joe and Panama City, Port Panama City, had almost twice the population, i.e. market reach, than Miami and Tampa. That really turned this one group on. They saw that and said, we'll be there in 6 or 8 weeks.
That's phenomenal.
If you get thinking about it, 2 smaller towns, of course, Miami and Tampa are much larger than here, that's true. But when you talk about from a time product's dropped off and to where it's shipped to, where it can reach in a day, that's significant.
Wayne Stubbs, director of Port Panama City. I've known Wayne for a lot of years. Very dynamic guy. They, on their own, have a lot of irons in the fire, trying to find new markets, trying to find people to deal with. But I would say that with one fell swoop, what you were able to accomplish through this trip you're talking about eclipses any other efforts.
Well, you can be sure that we will, when those people, if we can get them here, they'll see ours. But we hold hands with Wayne. Tommy Pitts is our port manager down in Port St. Joe, and Tommy and Wayne are good pals, and we communicate and we'll cooperate. Janet Watermeyer is the new ED person there. I've had Janet over the house. I mean, this is, we are not battling each other. We are all on the same team. We can't do containers. They could probably do more. If we could do bulk and by the same token have the same client that we're looking at run containers through them, and both Port St. Joe and Port of Panama City have rail coming right up to CSX and then I-10.
So many different directions to go with this conversation. This is exciting. Let's go back to what you alluded to. Transportation. I believe that we are in the transportation center of Northwest Florida. You mentioned CSX rail. You mentioned I-10, 77, 79, 231, 20. We are literally in an area of Florida accessible from literally anywhere. Interesting tidbit. My wife and I, after 35 years of being in Panama City Beach, moved to Wausau, Florida 5 years ago, a little old town. But our kids and grandkids who are in Atlanta, Mobile, find it cut off almost half of their trip because that last hour was the painful hour going from I-10 to the beach because you were fighting all the little roads, lots of traffic. Whereas just we are so accessible,
especially with the new airport.
Exactly.
Well, you know what people don't realize, and this may shock you, from the port of the Panama Canal, from the Panama Canal, Port of Panama City is 30 miles closer than the Port of Miami. As straight as a bird flies, no. But there's this little thing called Cuba that you got to get around and get into. So that proximity to that canal is going to be essential. And I think it's kind of ironic because the history, Panama City used to be called Harrison, if I'm not mistaken. And its name was changed to Panama City because it was a shipping point to as when they constructed the canal. How ironic that canal is going to now help, I think, us develop our economy.
The Panama Canal, I've always been a big fan of engineering miracles. I call it miracles because some of them really are. I've often thought that the Panama Canal should probably be considered one of the wonders of the world. Tremendous engineering and construction feat. They battled everything from malaria to the indigent population. As you alluded to again, we're increasing the size so that it will now be able to accommodate literally every ship that now sail the seas, and then some, because that's going to increase as well.
By the way, those ships are under construction right now, waiting. So hopefully the timing on both will be in place. It is amazing. Wayne and I both went down to Wayne Stubbs from Port of Panama City. We all went down to the Panama Canal, and we watched the construction and viewed it. Amazing is about the only word that works. Someone thinks a lot bigger than I do. I'm just telling you, it is amazing.
But to put in that kind of investment, you just know it's going to pay off in spades.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's going to drive traffic. I mean, it's, they're not going to abandon their investment. They're going to utilize that. And whether we like it or not, we are in a global economy, and people who think they're going to stop that and turn that around, I'm sorry. That ship has left, that train has left the station.
You mentioned that much of the product that we inherited because of the impact Katrina had on New Orleans was copper. Where does that copper come from, and where's it destined for?
Chile, and it deadheads into here, and it's shipped up rail. I think it hooks up to CSX and wherever they need it. And if we're looking at this coal coming out of Colombia, and we've got to reduce our carbon footprint. Well, we have I think of Gulf Power. They have coal-driven energy plants, and if getting this helps them reduce their, boy, that would be great for them. Both of them are fed by barge, and it might be the Southern Company, their holding company. They get it to that CSX rail, and Lord knows where it could end up.
We recently had Darren Wall, who's the local manager of Gulf Power in Chipley,
Darren's a member
Florida.
of my board, yes.
And I realized that. He pointed out, actually, the fact that every Gulf Power office has at least one representative on the local workforce board. By mandate, they feel that they want that much of a say-so in that process, and that speaks volumes for them. He pointed out that they haven't had a price increase in 12 years. Your electric bill has gone up, but that's the fuel part of the bill, not the energy.
Not the right.
So,
not the operation side.
Exactly. And he pointed out that, you know, if lightning hits a pole and they have to replace that pole and transformer and a bunch of wire, they don't charge anybody for that. They have to absorb that per Public Service Commission. But going back to what you're talking about, cheaper coal, cheaper energy, cheaper production of power, potentially electric bills can go down if they're paying less for fuel.
And meeting the environmental demands that, you know, they're out there, and we've got to find ways, economic ways, where we can keep people employed, et cetera, and reduce the carbon footprint. And I don't think anybody's against that. And if just by using a different coal, and you don't have to come up with any new magic device that filters it, but just by its own nature having less sulfur, well, all the better.
You mentioned the 8-county area here in Northwest Florida that you represent on behalf of Opportunity Florida, and you mentioned your trip to Cartegena, Colombia. Do you have any other international irons in the fire that you can speak of right now?
Well, you know, we look at, right now we think that the Panama Canal is our next, that's going to be an opportunity for us, and I know Wayne feels the same way. So we went to Panama, went to Cartegena. I have made one other contact with a group out of Lima, Peru, and they operate all of Lima's ports. Well, obviously that's on the other side. Everything they do comes through here. We're in talks with them, and of course the next thing is I think we need to put a trade mission together and head for China, because those are the guys that are determining, you know, what needs to come through and where it needs to end up. So I would see that in the future.
It boggles the mind, anyone who was even familiar with Opportunity Florida, to realize that you represent 8 relatively small rural counties, and yet here you are trying to pave the way for international business, which is going to have an impact potentially of the whole United States. That's pretty strong. Well,
you know, I say necessity is the mother of invention. I think that we have to look at those opportunities, and if people don't get that we have a global economy, and it's only going to become more global, that's what you have to focus on. Because, you know, we did this, and I think your site, we used to offer, or we still do, offer little sites in for all the businesses of our region. Just a little blurb, maybe a picture or two or something like that. But we, obviously, for obvious reasons, they don't go straight to the site. I have to review them. I don't want any dirty pictures or anything up there. But you'd be amazed how many Chinese companies have submitted their information on that. Almost equal to the number of local businesses that have put theirs on. Obviously, I don't put them up, but they keep wanting to have their business listed. One was a wedding dress company. You took your own measurements, you sent them the stuff, they put it through where it was COD, they made the dress. That's competition with the folks down the street, if you get my drift. It's amazing. So we have to become equally proactive, and sitting around and really crying in our beer, so to speak, that's not fair. You know, fair comes in October, the last 3 weeks. We got to compete, and my job is to help Opportunity Florida and the businesses in my region compete in a global stage.
I can't tell you, Rick, how refreshing this conversation is, because we so often are only exposed to the people who, again, are crying the blues. You know, interestingly, there are still people sitting on their stoops in New Orleans wondering why the government not coming to help them. Whereas Memphis, who went through in its own way an equally devastating situation, is back and open for business.
Right.
I want to talk more about what we're talking about, which is the big picture of Opportunity Florida and what you're doing with Opportunity Florida. But I really don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about the exciting development in broadband internet access. Will you stick around for the second half of the show?
Sure will. Look forward to it.
And thanks so much for being our
You
guest.
bet. Thank you for having me.
Our guest today is Rick Markham, who is Executive Director with Opportunity Florida. I've got chill bumps. If you're a businessman, if you're involved in business and commerce in any way in this part of the Southeast United States, you've got to get excited with this kind of news. I'm sure that most communities, most states have organizations such as Opportunity Florida. All I can say is we're lucky to have this guy who's sitting next to me representing us. You're watching Real Florida TV. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, if there's something you'd like to see featured, give us a call, drop us an email, or visit our website at realfloridatv.com. We'll be right back with Rick and more when we come back to Real Florida TV. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Rick Markham, Executive Director with Opportunity Florida. If you've seen the first half of the show, you're as I am, probably excited about everything that Opportunity Florida is doing, is trying to do, has planned to do. But really the reason that I asked Rick to come on the show today was to talk about some pretty exciting news. It's not really news anymore. It's certainly been disseminated through the press, but many people don't understand the ramifications. Rick, tell us a little bit about what's happening with broadband wireless internet access.
Well, it's a stimulus grant program through the U.S. Department of Commerce, the NTIA, and the first round passed us over in the process. So we had to learn. We had to say, okay, what did we do wrong there? We went for what they call a last mile. In other words, we were we were a retailer per se. And what the government really wanted to do, and the good news about this program is the government does not want to, they want to make sure there's an equal stage, and all they are doing is providing the infrastructure for any business, ISP, internet service provider that wants to access that, they can. So this is about capacity, not giving someone a heads-up edge over another one. So all the local ISPs that if they do, let's say they do fiber or they do cable to the house or whatever, and they want to get into this, they can do that. All the current ISPs can access our wireless system and do that. We had the second round, so, I just spoke with so many consultants. All these different, and boy, a lot of it just went here. But it was 35 days before that grant was due that I finally settled in on a way we connected all the dots. We had it all lined up, and thank goodness there was a 10-day extension on that 35 days. But we got it in there a couple of days early. We weren't there long till we learned that we were in due diligence. That means we had made first cut, and we had to respond to all their questions. And there were numerous. We had some great consultants, the Government Services Group out of Tallahassee. Pat Lean was our lead man. Robert Sheets he's the CEO for the corporation. They were fantastic. They kept us informed. We had conference calls every morning, every evening. We were all in touch. We were moving the information around. These were 10 and 12-hour days for that 45 days. And we got her in. And the due diligence, we worked equally hard in that process because there was a lot of detailed information. And then we got the heads up last Wednesday. And it's going to take a while to get this grin off my face. It was good news. After going through the first one, I was so skeptical. I don't know, but we got it. And we had to come up with skin in the game private sector investors, and we did that. We had to come up with a working line of credit with a bank, came up with that. So it was just getting the team together and an experienced team and getting the two organizations, because I shared this with the other rural area of critical economic concern, or one of the others, in Central Florida. And we're having our first board meeting in Orlando on the 15th. So it's an exciting time, and it feels good. You know, it's very rare do you get to knock one out of the ballpark, and boy, when it does, you want to just walk real slow till you get back to home plate. But that's where we were, and that's where we are still.
I'm a simple guy, and I understand things better if they're laid out simply. So the nuts and the bolts of this are that there was a pot of money available through some of the stimulus, and I'm going to let you give some of the details here in a second. There was some stimulus money available, just under $24 million, the way I understand it. Again, you can give us those details. You petitioned for and received the ability to get some of that money, which would effectively make available to a rural area with this 8-county area that you, as Executive Director of Opportunity Florida here, represent, that it will allow people to get high-speed internet access wirelessly, right, where before they had no access at all to the internet.
Everyone, they've had dial-up, and you know, everyone knows how inefficient and time-wasting that is. But let me kind of back up a little bit. The pot of money was $1.7 billion.
Okay.
Of which we got our hands on right at a little under 24 million.
Okay.
But we had to come up with another $10 million of in-kind and cash commitments to get that. So whoever got those monies had to have skin in the game. Everyone is in this thing together, and that's those were the deals that got done. And we were one of them, one of the first ones on the second round.
So tell us in broad strokes what is going to happen over what period of time, and what benefit are we going to see from this whole exercise?
First benefit will be competition. We will have competition. People will be able to choose either between wireless, or maybe they only have one other hardwired provider, and they may have 3 or 4. But we're going to accelerate the competition. There's a group that came up with our kind of matching skin in the game money out of Atlanta, called Main Street Broadband. As a matter of fact, it's a local Panama City businessman that owns them. And they have an RUS loan, a low interest loan, and they will be hooking up to our systems and delivering that last mile to the house, to the farm, to wherever, or within the city of Chipley. And and they are mandated by way of their loan that it must be affordable. It must be affordable for that region, and there are a lot of little ways of calculating that affordability that the USD has put on them. So we've got that. But anyone who, let's say the city of Chipley said, we're already billing for picking up trash and doing some other things, why don't we get into that business? I mean, I'm not saying they should, but if they wanted to, they could. And that's what's really amazing, is that we're going to hook up all the hospitals. The hospitals are going to be hooked up so that they can, you know, you have an MRI done here in Chipley and it can be read in Tallahassee. Well, they need someone who with special expertise. This is a unique car wreck or whatever else. They can ship that up to Johns Hopkins, and you know, in lickety-split, you have the most professional person in the world reading that. We can have the children who work on farms and work with their parents, staying at the farm, still wanting a college degree, on their schedule. They can sign up for courses at Florida State, go home, not have to drive to Tallahassee, go home, download and stream that classroom, and be able to go to college and stay at home and help with the family farm. Telemedicine, nurses can go from place to place with a broadcast unit. They can look at someone, give symptoms, be in discussion with the doctor, and people who are elderly and maybe can't afford it, we can reach them with maybe a nurse or a physician's assistant and right there in their house. So we may be going back to the days where, you know, you had house calls. So all of those benefits that come with that, and kids doing homework, and they need to do research on a certain subject, some historic thing. Well, you know, they have to wait till they get back into town to go to the library and get it home. They'll be able to do that and get better grades. Let's put it on them for that.
The local hospital here in Washington County recently installed equipment that allows, in their emergency room, with a high-resolution camera and a computer system, the ability to put a patient on video with the local physician, beam that information, including, most important part, is that video, high-resolution video, to an expert, a specialist in whatever field is necessary, anywhere literally in the world. It could actually be that person's physician who's on vacation in the Bahamas, as long as they've got their laptop. And our question to them was, that's great if you're in the hospital and if your physician is somewhere where they have internet access. Would this not be possible to do with an ambulance as soon as a paramedic picks up a patient? And they say, well, the problem is that there's no reliable wireless access. All of a sudden, we're in a different ballgame.
We're in a different ballgame. We're on the scene of an accident or whatever else we need to we broadcast. We can pick that up and we can send that in, and crucial decisions can be made when they need to be made, not after the fact when a mistake has been made. So, another thing that, and a lot of people love. You and I are both that generation that we're supposed to retire, but we're not doing it. But there's a lot of baby boomers that would like to go back to rural communities and live. And maybe they're attorneys or they have some kind of professional service. My wife's a CPA. And like I've told you today, she's traveled and followed me all over the place, and that means New Mexico, Texas, and Florida. And she still has her customers from New Mexico. She still has them from Texas, and of course here. And she can get on a computer in Santa Fe, New Mexico, get into their computer and look and see, and if she's got a accounting problem, see where a mistake was made. That's amazing. So a lot of people, screenwriters, anyone who can move their product or via video conferencing or whatever else, they can come here and retire.
And only because you did mention the St. Joe Company specifically, who are a huge engine in driving economic development in this part of the world. They have recently decided to move their corporate headquarters from Jacksonville to just adjacent to the new airport in West Bay, which they can do through the miracle of high-speed internet access, because literally a corporate executive in their building in West Bay can do anything that they could have done in any other city in the world.
Absolutely. And that is going to be the catalyst for bringing other corporate headquarters. And that's something we've really never chased that much. Now we can. And I like the fact that they did it, because it's kind of like, not only what's the best way to be an example to the people that you're investing in their region, move your corporate headquarters there. And quality of life does kick in, and I grew up in West Texas where there was none. So we've got a heck of a product to sell when it comes to quality of life.
So would it be fair to say that at the end of the 2.5-year build-out, or whatever that date happens to be with this project, with the wireless access, that within those 8 counties, and all of the folks living in those areas will have access to wireless should a provider come in and decide to provide?
Should. That's an important thing. We're going to hit, Main Street's going to hit a bunch first, and I'll be amazed or surprised if the other ISPs say, what do we have to do? We don't have to overcome the cost of the infrastructure. Why can't we add another marketing component to our arsenal? So I think we will see a lot of the ISPs jump on board. Until saying, if you can't whip them, join them. I'm hoping they do.
And forgive me if I'm getting too technical here, but is it possible that a cable provider would possibly capture this wireless signal and then disseminate that through cable or through fiber optic at that point? Or would that be going from a 2-inch hose down to a 1-inch hose?
Well, what they have to do is they have to have a POP, a point of presence. So we provide those, and they can access those distribution points. Now, I'm not the engineer on this, so I may be off on that, but I will have that answer the next time if you want me back. We'll talk about it then. But I'm pretty sure that if they can access our microwave system, they can take it, and they can buy as much bandwidth that they want, and they know how they're going to sell that. So, we are basically unlimited with the amount of bandwidth we're going to have.
Would it be fair to say, with the advent of this project that you're just now getting involved in, that we're not in Kansas anymore? That we're really changing the face of Northwest Florida?
My wife's from Kansas, and she's going to watch this show, so I'm not going to say it. But yes, you can click your heels 3 times. We are not in Kansas anymore. We can. We're going to fight with the big boys, and they're going to be surprised how tough we can be.
Pretty amazing development. I would imagine that there are similar projects elsewhere in the United States.
Oh yes, and there was an emphasis through this set aside, this designated money for rural. Rural nationwide has its challenges, especially with high fuel costs. So wherever we can, if we can exchange information, product, and via the internet, and not have to, burn carbon, burn gas, and the time wasted in that delivery system, oh happy day.
My wife can't get me to drive to Panama City. It's less than an hour, but I still look at that 2 hours a day wasted sitting in a car, not being able to be productive. So believe me, time is worth a lot more than money.
Oh, absolutely.
You can get more money.
Especially when you get our age.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that there were 2 areas, one in Central Florida, one in Northwest Florida, that qualified for this program. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand the facts that are associated with the deal is that these 2 landmasses make up roughly 20% of the landmass of Florida, that there's close to bordering on 500,000 people in these 2 areas, and that as of today, only 39 or so percent of those 2 areas have access to
internet
of any kind.
Of any kind.
At any speed.
At any speed.
So not only is this going to make these 2 areas virtually, should the ISPs decide to come in, and which business is business, they're coming eventually.
Somebody's going to.
That eventually there will be 100% availability of high-speed wireless internet access.
Exactly. Now there is one other RACEC, and it's called the North Central RACEC, and they had the same grant writers. Basically, it took us a long time to determine what they did the first round was the best way to go. But we want to make sure we turned every rock over. So all 3 rural areas of critical economic concern will now get broadband, and we're gonna change the way things happen.
Now, would that 3rd area be north of Alachua County and west of Jacksonville?
It would probably, yes, pretty much that stretch. And there's 14 counties over there from Jefferson and all through the I-10 corridor, and then down all the way to Taylor and Perry and some of those counties. Now, there's 14, I forget which ones they are, but they were also designated a rural area of critical economic concern.
So will you stick around for the second half of the
Sure
show?
will. Look forward to it.
And thanks so much for being our
guest. You bet. Thank you for having me.
Our guest today is Rick Markham, who is Executive Director with Opportunity Florida. We'll be right back with Rick and more when we come back to Real Florida TV. Welcome back to Real Florida TV. Today our guest is Rick Markham. Rick is currently the Executive Director for Opportunity Florida. Interesting organization, works toward economic development with a fine eye on some of the more rural areas in our part of Florida. What do you do at the end of the day to gear down? You've got to get excited to the point where it's just hard to relax, I would imagine. I mean, you've got the best job in the world.
I do. I'll amen that. I do have the best job in the world. It hadn't always been the best job then, but the last 3 weeks it's the best job in the world. But it's just a new day. We've got to sharpen our pencils. We've got to think bigger. We've got to think out of the box more. We need to think we can more, because we can now. And we're going to increase our capacity. And one thing I didn't mention, there's a good revenue stream 5 and 6 years out. So are we going to grow Opportunity Florida? Absolutely not. It is 2 people. What we're going to do is whatever revenues that flow through the Florida Rural Broadband Alliance to the 2 RACECs, they're going back to the local level. They're going back to the counties. They're going back to the local EDDOs, the local hospitals, wherever. We're going, because that's where real economic development's done. I'm in the business of building capacity and regional marketing. These guys, local, they have to make it happen. And so if we can beef up their resources, that's our job.
Being in the marketing and media businesses, we're slowly coming to terms, as much as we don't want to, with the fact that terrestrial radio, terrestrial TV, print newspaper, they're not going away. But the younger generation, some of which will never watch a TV show, they'll never listen to a radio program, they'll never read a newspaper. They are spoiled, even more than we baby boomers were. They have and will get anything they want on demand. The way we market, the way we advertise is totally changing. You know, it used to be on radio with 60-second commercials. Absolutely. Then we went to 30-second commercials. You know, now they're going to 10 and 15-second because our attention span is that much shorter. Well, in the case of the kids, they're getting everything through podcasts on their smartphones. Marketing is changing. And the people who are spending the money, which is that younger generation, whichever they're calling it now, you know, it was Generation X, it was Generation Next, it was the tweeners, whatever you want to call them, the grandparents and that younger generation are the ones that are spending the money. The ones in the middle, especially in these economic times, the parents, they're working 2 jobs, they're grabbing a sandwich out, they're throwing a sandwich to the kid. It's the grandparents who are teaching these kids how to hunt and fish. It's the ones that are buying their gifts. It's the ones that are basically caretakers to a great extent, through no fault of the parents. But unfortunately, because of our economic challenges, these people are just spending all their time generating money just to get by. So the high-speed internet is not only important, it's vital to our growth, our educational process, and to engage these young people. To me, that's the most important part.
And you know, there's no saying you can't teach old dogs new tricks. That's not true. 8 years ago, no, not 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I barely checked email. You'd be surprised what this old geezer can do now. I can get on there, and I do a lot of my research. And by the way, I don't get the newspaper anymore. I will go through and I'll see, I get broken down locally, nationally, worldwide, and I can highlight those things. If I want to buy some stock or anything like that, I get an updated information on that. I make my living paying attention to the world and getting my message out, and all of that takes place via the internet.
And now, if you live in Panama City, you don't just read the News Herald. Now you look at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times, literally any newspaper online in the world that you want to.
When I say I don't get the newspaper, I still read the News Herald. It's online.
Exactly.
And that's part of where they're going to have to go, and it's part of their problem in the fact that the advertising, they got to kind of find a way to get that advertising in front of you to make the revenues that will keep them up and viable on that. So it's a changing world.
What's interesting is that every TV, radio, and newspaper company is putting tremendous amount of resources into their online versions of their product. There's not a TV, radio station, or newspaper that doesn't offer their product at some price, sometimes free, online. We recently carried a story that was carried in the News Herald. And I received a call from one of the editors at the News Herald, Mike Casalaz, saying, Paul, great job of picking up that story. You didn't do anything wrong by carrying the story. You gave us the byline. You attributed the story to us. We'd much prefer that you put the first paragraph and then direct them back to our website, because that's where our bread and butter is. That spoke volumes to me.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't care that anybody was stealing their news stories. What they wanted was them ultimately for me to direct them back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So a huge revenue stream there.
Yeah.
Rick, thank you so much for taking your time.
I appreciate it. I just, every chance I can to get out and let the people of my 8 counties know that what's coming and how to get a hold of it, I appreciate it very much.
This show through terrestrial TV does cover all of those 8 counties that you represent for Opportunity Florida. More importantly, it's available online, and we keep very close watch on the stats for our website, for realfloridatv.com, and amazingly, it gets hits from all over the world. It shows up in Google searches when a guest such as yourself is Google searched, and then they have the opportunity to watch a 30-minute segment with you versus just getting some static text somewhere.
Right.
So we're learning along with the rest of the world, and congratulations on you being able to step into that high-tech world.
Well, we're you know, when you quit learning, I think that's a bad sign. We're never too old. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks for all you do. Thanks to Susan Estes. Between the two of you, carrying a big load, you've got a huge partnership and lots of help out there. I certainly know that. But you're doing a great job. Thanks for all you do, and thanks again for being on our show.
Good. Thank you.
You're watching Real Florida TV. Today our guest is Rick Markham, Executive Director for Opportunity Florida here in Northwest Florida. Exciting news, exciting prospects for the future. There's going to be more to come. Hopefully Rick is going to join us again before long, give us updates on the progress for this wireless access in our area. And I'm sure that you're going to be happy to get the news that Rick is going to share with us over time. If you are involved in business and commerce in any way in this part of the Southeast United States, you've got to get excited with this kind of news. I'm sure that most communities, most states have organizations such as Opportunity Florida. All I can say is we're lucky to have this guy who's sitting next to me representing us. You're watching Real Florida TV. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, if there's something you'd like to see featured, give us a call, drop us an email, or visit our website at realfloridatv.com. We'll be right back with Rick and more when we come back to Real Florida TV.